Knights at the Round Table, a round table discussion on speculative fiction books and film. Hi everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Series 5 of Knights at the Round Table. Today we are discussing the 2000 sci-fi comic book adaptation X-Men. I'm sitting at the table here with Marjolaine and with Martin, and we're just going to jump straight in with first impressions. Marjolaine?
I really like this movie. It's fun, it's campy, it's not too demanding, but it's a good movie for what it is and for a good spark for everything that came after it.
Mm-hmm. Martin?
I think Marjolaine just summed it up very well. It's a good spark for what came afterwards. This is kind of the first... It'll always have a soft place in my heart because it was the first time we'd seen these characters brought to life in... for a, I can't even say realistic, but in a good comic book adaptation of a that became a movie. However, against the pantheon of movies we have today, doesn't really stack up. No, but I'll still always love it.
Agreed. I remember walking out of the cinema after watching this there and being like, oh my god, finally, a good comic book movie. Yes, this was amazing. Yes. And then I watched it last night and I'm like, I don't remember it being this hokey. But it still has a soft spot in my heart. It's the first comic book adaptation that I really loved walking out of the cinema with. And even though watching back now, it's still pretty cheesy in some places. And oh my god, the fight choreography, and oh my god, the fight sound effects. Oh, make it stop. It's still a lot of fun.
Well, that's it. I think I can watch this movie anytime because it's got that soft nostalgic spot in my heart that I just kind of just ignore some things, like when Wolverine slides around the Empire State Building with his claws. And you're just like, whatever.
Statue of Liberty.
Statue of Liberty. I'm good with that. But if you watch that today, if you introduced somebody who hadn't seen superhero movies to X-Men today, I think they would leave going, what?
Yeah, it's against everything that's come after. Well, not everything. Some superhero movies were still really shit. But most of the stuff that's come after is much more sophisticated and nuanced and interesting. But I still really love it. I mean, some of the acting could have been worked on. But Ian McKellen, Patrick Stewart, and even Hugh Jackman still hold up. Those three in particular, I'm like, yeah, you guys are very much still these characters. Mm-hmm. They're going to have a tough time replacing Jackman for Wolverine. They really are.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was perfect for it. And Stewart is Professor X. And
I think, though, it was interesting is when Jackman was first cast, people were very angry with that casting.
Were they?
They were. They thought that he wasn't, he was too
tall.
Too
pretty boy.
He wouldn't buy, too pretty boy. And today, if you mention Wolverine, everybody thinks of Hugh Jackman because he became that role.
Yeah. The thing that struck me most watching this is I'm like, Wolverine's a lot leaner than in other films. But actually, I heard a story that he went dressed in full Wolverine costume on, I think it was San Diego Comic-Con, walked the floor, and everybody was like, good Wolverine costume, but you're too tall. And he's like, but I am Wolverine, guys! I didn't hear any of the fuss about his casting.
It's kind of a weird point to say because it's not, it's early internet days. It's the year 2000. Message boards, forums aren't what they are today. There's, YouTube doesn't exist. So you either, would have heard it in an article in the newspaper or maybe not at all or some obscure spot. It wouldn't be like Heath Ledger being cast as a Joker or Jared Leto where there's huge reaction videos to those things.
Oh, yeah. Fans can get a bit weird about that sort of stuff. Yeah. Although, I have to admit, when they cast Wonder Woman, I wasn't sure about it.
Yeah, I think, though, it's a good case of giving actors a shot to be actors and seeing what they produce. Because we have had some terrific performances from people that have been underrated in the past.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a fuss about Hugh Jackman. Proved them all wrong, didn't he?
Well, typical fanboy thing is Wolverine is supposed to be exactly this height. And we need an actor who embodies these physical characteristics, is somehow built like a brick house, has muscles on top of his muscles. Like, it just,
Yay, unrealistic body representation.
Yeah, that's it. Like,
No, Wolverine was my favorite character from the comics. I used to watch the TV
90s?
show from the 90s.
Yeah.
Which, I have to say, to the composer of the music in this, thank you for including the theme from the TV show in the music. I remember specifically sitting in the cinema and hearing that particular key. And I just went, yes! My little fangirl heart just exploded. I'm sitting there going, yes! My dad's beside me not understanding what the hell's going on. Like, that was a nice little touch. I think that's part of the reason why I loved it so much coming out of the cinema, is they did pay homage to the TV show and the stuff that came before it.
Oh, definitely. I think they did, just even where Wolverine steals Cyclops' motorcycle. And, throughout the 90s animated show, he's perpetually stealing Cyclops' stuff or turning his car into his Corvette into a convertible or things like that. Like, it's a 100% Wolverine thing to do.
Yeah. Now I want to go back and watch the TV show.
The TV show is just as good. Again, I think because I grew up on the TV show, I love it.
Well, you have to be careful with that too, though, because I grew up on Transformers. Loved it when I was a kid. Went back, watched some of the TV show, and went, "That's fucking awful. What the hell? Why did I like this so much?"
Nostalgia will only go so far.
It's fun, though, too, to see some of the representations, like, as Canadians, when Rogue first meets Wolverine in this Canadian bar where they're fighting by the side of the highway, and I remember watching that in the theater being like, where on earth do they think this is? Like, there's...
Oh, then you're an Alberta boy, too!
Yeah, that's it. Like, I saw that, and I'm an Alberta boy, lived in Calgary. I had just moved to Ontario at that point in 2000, had been all over the province, and then they're in this Alberta truck stop where you fight for money in a
Laughlin
cage.
City.
Yeah, Laughlin City. I was like, I have never seen a place like that in my life. That said, where he turns around and he's first time the claws come out and the bartender puts the gun up to his head and the shotgun, he comes out and claws cut through. Awesome.
Yeah, there's Wolverine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who was your favorite X-Men character growing up? Out of curiosity.
My favorite X-Men character was always Wolverine,
Yeah,
just
me too.
because he was the Canadian guy that was out there. I also liked, Wolverine is kind of the Worf of X-Men, because of his healing factor.
Yeah.
Is if something can beat up Wolverine, it was always tough. So he was always dealing with the toughest things, getting thrown through walls, getting beaten up, getting slammed under rubble. Like, Wolverine dealt with stuff like Cyclops got punched in the belly. And you were like, okay. Like, if you needed somebody to go run through the Savage Land and fight dinosaurs and get, have to track people and get beaten up, that was a Wolverine. He's 100% the Worf of the X-Men world.
Yeah.
But it made him very interesting that he had to deal with all of these problems, whereas, Cyclops just either shot or got punched and went down.
Yeah. No, I have to say, because watching this show, I was a Canadian girl growing up in Australia. Well, I'm both Canadian and Australian, but the Canadian side of me was like, yes, Wolverine! The other side that I liked about Wolverine so much was he was Canadian, but he was rude AF! And it made me smile, because it went against all the stereotypes of Canadians that were out there. He, not so much swore, but he was, hyper-aggressive and just mean and petty, and it was great.
Well, and I think that is what gave him character dimension, is he was petty and rude, and he was brave, and, he's far more three-dimensional character than almost anybody else on the show.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. What about for yourself? What's your favorite X-Men character? Or who is your favorite what? Huh?
Yeah. It could be a what.
Racist! Sorry. Yeah, it could be a what, I guess.
There are machines in there, so if you vote with the Sentinels, it is
a
what.
I love the Sentinels.
I do not love the Sentinels. Are we talking about this movie, the 90s comic,
In the whole
or
pantheon.
everything?
Yeah.
Polaris.
Ah.
Absolutely. I mean, when I first saw the movie, I was interested in a lot of the characters, but I didn't have a favorite exactly, and I wasn't really into the comic books. So I looked into the comic books, and then I discovered Polaris, and now she's my favorite ever.
Oh, I don't know much about Polaris, actually. I have to go look into it.
Oh.
Yeah, she is featured in the new X-Men TV show, The Gifted,
Oh, yeah.
and it's an excellent representation of Polaris.
Really? Oh, noted. Excellent. Yeah. So what were your main issues then with the movie?
My main issue, I guess, with the movie is, there's these villain layers. Like, Magneto is able to have a lair, like, right around New York. Professor X is able to have a magnificent lair around New York. Like, and it's super cool that the pool moves and, that a plane comes out of that. And now, being involved in the construction industry, like, this isn't a weekend project that he did with a couple of his friends. Like, this is a major construction endeavor. How did he get the permit for an underground hangar? Like,
How to tell you're an adult?
Yeah.
How did he get the permit?
yeah. Like, there are some zoning issues. Like, where is this cave that Magneto has? Like, that's a big cave. Like, there are people that go out and legitimately explore these things. How does he keep that spot secret? It's quite the complex. Like, but he's got power and he's got lighting. Like, is he tapping off the grid? Like, there's... it'd be much more believable if, he was off in some suburban Manhattan apartment and they all just got together and like, yeah, we rented out the loft floor because we stole some money.
I didn't even think about that. Did not even cross my mind. You're right.
Yeah, I'm involved in city infrastructure and buildings, and I look at these things and I'm like, how do they have these? Like,
Jeez, mine were much more technical. The fight choreography wasn't great.
Yeah.
Which was weird because I remember thinking it was pretty good when I came. But in 2000, I guess you don't really have.
Well, that's it. I think to start it off as the very first one, when you have nothing else to compare it against. Yeah. It's awesome.
Well, yeah. And the fight sounds. The fight sounds sounded like they came straight out of like a 60s movie. It was every time somebody hit, and the like whoop 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 sound when somebody was flipping. I'm like, oh, why? Unnecessary. But yeah, it made me laugh every time there was a fight, and I just heard those sound effects. I was just sitting watching this and just going. This is not funny. This is really serious. Stop it. So yeah, the sound effects for me were not great. They could remaster it. She says hopefully. They're not going to.
No, they're not.
They're not going to. What about for yourself? Was there anything that stood out?
Some of the dialogues. I mean, especially because I remembered vividly watching. I got the DVD as soon as I could, obviously, and I watched all the deleted scenes. And some of the deleted scenes, some of the dialogue, I could tell where it had been truncated, and it's either like the conversation between Cyclops and Wolverine after Jean Grey looks into his mind. Like, it's 4 lines of dialogue, but I've seen the whole scene, and it's the 4 lines that they left were weird outside of that context. And it's one of the things that like either she leaves the room, cut the scene, move on, or like play the whole thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, see, I don't know any of the deleted scenes, even though I should have watched them, but I was tired last night after watching 2 movies, so I went to bed.
Yeah, I do agree with you on the dialogue. Like, I think, where Storm is talking to Senator Kelly, and, do you hate us? Sometimes. Like, it was stilted, and it just didn't come off. I knew what they were going for, and it was the heart of the X-Men has always been to push some of these issues. I I just think that was... They hadn't really figured out how to write those issues into movies yet.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then there is one line of dialogue that is really bad dialogue, but I will love it forever, and that is Storm saying, "Do you know what happens to a toad when it gets hit by lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else." It's really bad, and the delivery isn't great, but I love that line.
See, I also love that line. I remember watching that as a kid watching this and like, same thing that happens to everybody else. Kapow! And I was like, yeah! And then like years later, people were like, that's the worst line of dialogue ever. And I was like, it is? Oh, dang it.
Yeah.
I was really passionate about that part.
Along the cheesy lines thing, we did discuss this in the break, but the reference, the continual reference to the comic books made me laugh. So when they're all dressed up and they're heading out to try and save Rogue, and Wolverine's adjusting his new uniform, he's like, "You guys go outside in these things?" And Cyclops says, "Well, what would you prefer, yellow spandex?" I was laughing both last night when I watched it and in the cinema when I watched it. I think I may have been the only one in the cinema who got that reference, because I think I was the only one in the cinema laughing at it, if I remember rightly. I was so disappointed with the rest of the audience. But again, it's a cheesy line, but it still worked for me, just because of the sort of little bit of fan service that they give you in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent one. I laughed at that point as well, and I think, though, it's a testament to the times, though, is if you rolled out the X-Men today, rolling them out in black leather unitards is as equally as ridiculous as the yellow spandex. Like,
I mean, I don't know. People are still putting characters in boob armor.
Well,
Yeah.
superheroes are superheroes. But like, you look at Ant-Man and the Wasp now. They're far more colorful. They've got gadgets and gizmos on them. Like Captain America is much more colorful. Like these were like mass-produced leather outfits that they forced everybody to get into. We're like, off you go. That's.
I did like them though. I do like that uniform.
It's. But I think for the same purposes, I love the Wolverine nostalgia armor and the Storm cape that she normally wears.
Yeah. She had the cape in the movie, so yeah, that's true.
But like early 90s or like early 2000s leather fetish was definitely in that movie. It was.
Yeah. They couldn't know I would age or.
Well, no, of course not. Like. I just think we've got better construction materials today.
Yeah. Better costumers.
I like that this costume actually sort of inspired the Astonishing X-Men line that came after the movie.
Oh.
Where they are all wearing black leather.
Black leather.
And those as their uniform.
Oh, another movie moment that I really, really, really loved, and it will always have a place in my heart as one of the best Wolverine moments, is when they're walking through the bottom floor of the Statue of Liberty, and he walks through the metal detectors, and they go off, so he slams his claws into it, and Cyclops turns around and just like gives him an awful look, and so he retracts 2 claws but leaves one up to give him the finger. That was, I'm like, yeah, they got Wolverine right, yay!
Well, yeah, when Mystique has impersonated him, it comes out, he's like, how do we know you're you? You're a dick. Like,
Okay.
Yeah. Hostile team aggression that like.
So they did get a few things right, even if they didn't get.
No, I think they got the majority and the flavor of it all right, and we figured out, like, this was a film that was never built to be a universe, was never built to be a franchise, and that's where I think the X-Men suffer as an overall series of the movies, is the first bits of source material, like, there was no thought of making an X2 when X-Men came out. And then X2, it was a smash hit, blew away expectations. Oh, let's start to build on this universe, but there's no direction before that. So they've kind of zigged and zagged and tried to correct, and now you get the mess that is the X-Men universe today.
Yeah, which they tried to reset with Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which worked, which then raises more weird timeline questions. The X-Men timeline's a mess. Don't worry about it. Watch them as individual installments. It's fine.
It is quite a mess. I think during the break, we're saying that they're looking to reboot. Are they?
I think they are looking to reboot, or I don't know what they want to do once the Disney Fox deal goes through.
Yeah, has it not yet already gone through? I thought
It's in legal, so
okay.
it's been announced. What now has to happen is the government has to approve the sale, and that will likely take a year. But it's really all done but the crying for anybody who doesn't like the deal. And so when you have the next group of X-Men that they've kind of brought up, the First Class group, do you wipe them off? Do you get rid of all that continuity and start again? And if I were Disney, I would push a big old reset button, which means everybody in that universe right now is probably looking at some walking papers.
Yeah, I know. I'm trusting Disney with X-Men. X-Men is one of my favorite superhero franchises ever. The other movies that have come out, and as much as I've loved them, notwithstanding, X-Men has a very special place in my heart. So because Disney has been so good with the other Marvel movies, I'm really hoping they do reboot it, and I'm really, really hoping they do it well.
I don't. This is where I'm leery with the Disney takeover. Is Disney already has a property in the form of Marvel that they've developed a huge universe around, and it's a PG-13 universe, and then you've got Star Wars that they own as well, that they pump out a movie every year with, same sort of formula, PG-13 family movies. Is the X-Men going to be another continuation of that same kind of Disney formula, or are we going to get to see some chances like the standout hits in
like
kind of the
Deadpool and Logan?
Exactly.
Oh god, Logan was amazing.
That will you see those chances with the Disney network overwhelming?
Yeah, well, maybe. I've heard that they're loosening the reins a little bit after the success of Thor Ragnarok. They're loosening the reins just a little bit and letting the individual filmmakers make those kinds of decisions a bit. So we'll see. But they really have been knocking it out of the park with superhero movies.
Oh, they've done a good job. When you own 3 universe properties, differentiating them becomes an issue. You've got, essentially, techno magic people in the Marvel universe. You've got techno magic people in the Star Wars universe. You could argue you get the exact sort of same techno magic mutant people in the X-Men universe.
Yeah.
Do we see an X-Men movie, a Marvel movie, and a Star Wars movie that all look the same? And it would be reasonably easy to see that, where you have, Rey goes to meet Luke in Last Jedi, somebody goes to meet Professor X in X-Men, and, Spider-Man wants to join the Avengers in Homecoming. And there are your 3 movies that are all same sort of mentor template that you could line up and accidentally deploy together. Now I hope Disney has enough foresight to schedule that and use a property to take chances. X-Men's always been pushing the limits. If you could make this more of an adult property that pushes some of those limits, where
particularly since the subject matter they're tackling is really quite dark and depressing and really very scary at times. So yeah, I would like to see them push it in a more adult direction.
Well, and this is where I think you could use X-Men as kind of your R-rated property, where you get...
Well, and Deadpool, but that's only because of the gore.
Yeah. And the language.
Well, that's why I like Logan so much, because everybody was swearing in Logan. I'm like, yeah I would too.
But,
Sorry, Marvel has announced what they want to do. They do want to fold X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they're going to do a second series of R-rated movies. So they're going to continue with Deadpool. They want to do Cable. They're going to continue with the X-Men horror movies, which are coming out this summer, which is New Mutants.
Oh, yeah, New Mutants.
Yeah.
It's basically a haunted horror movie with mutants.
Right.
So they're going to use some of the mutants for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, usually the big names.
Yeah.
And then they're going to have the R-rated series. Some might cross over.
Oh, that's
Because
cool.
some characters can do both.
Well, yeah.
I want to see Robert Downey Jr. cursing out Wolverine.
I want to see Wolverine just tear the iron suit to shreds.
Well, that's I would be very interested to see these things. Like, Wolverine has always been a misfit in those films because, you look at him and he's running around and he stabs Mystique and she goes, oh, and falls over. And like, no way, he just gutted her. Like, you know, Wolverine is a hyper-violent psychopath who is like a murder machine on steroids. Like, can you show that, or is he always going to be, you know, that PG-13 friendly? And I think we saw in Logan, when you take the reins off Wolverine, whoa, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Agreed. I have no other questions that I wanted to ask. My mind just went blank.
So are there any superheroes that you felt didn't get justice in X-Men?
Oh, literally all of them except for the 3 that I mentioned. Like, Magneto, Professor X, and Wolverine all got their screen time. The other X-Men were kind of left lacking, which made me sad. Also, they weren't given the best dialogue to work with, which also made me sad. It would be nice to explore them a little more. But that might be just my Wolverine fatigue talking. I love Wolverine to pieces. I will watch anything with Wolverine in it.
Just Hugh Jackman shirtless. Watch him come out of those water tanks and stand up off a hospital bed. Just however you give me Hugh Jackman, I'm in.
Yeah. But I think the other X-Men also deserve their time in the light. So I'd like to see that focused on... I mean, I think Cyclops has a really tragic backstory, doesn't he? Didn't he, like, kill a whole
parents.
lot? Yeah, he killed a whole lot of people he really loved because of his...
his eyes.
His eyes, yeah. So that would have been fun to explore a bit more.
Fun!
Yeah.
It would be my kind of fun. I'm not a psychopath. Sorry?
Is it like in the back of the movie or something? Because that's not what happens in the comic.
Oh, I think it's what happened in the TV series, if I remember right.
Oh, okay.
Well, he loses his family in an airplane crash, and then he discovers his mutant powers at school, I thought. And depending on which version you watch, he either knocks a kid through a wall, or he vaporizes the kid, or
something like that.
Yeah, you know, the sort of power you get when your eyes turn into death rays suddenly. Like,
uncontrollable Superman.
Yeah. Marjolaine, is there anyone you thought didn't really get a good showing in this?
I would say especially Storm.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Storm, I mean, she has an incredible backstory. She could have been so much more, and she's supposed to be a character who has presence, and like we did not get that at all.
Yeah, that's true. Storm's a story about Storm would have been amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see Apocalypse. I know she's in that.
That's a little bit they're missing. Like again, they got the story where she was stealing stuff for food to survive
on the streets of Egypt.
On the street of Egypt, yeah. They didn't get to the part where she finds a group of people and they worship her as a goddess after she develops her powers.
Which, you know, I mean, if you can control the weather,
yes,
you kind of are.
Yes.
That's a very marketable skill, by the way. No, if there's a character that I thought really didn't get the showing, and in all these movies, has always been Rogue.
That's true.
Yeah.
Rogue is
Rogue being able to fly and to fight. Like, she's always been one of my favorite characters. She's one of the most tragic characters that's out there. She's super strong, super tough, witty, sharp, but can never have a real human interaction.
Hold somebody's hand.
Like, it's really rough, and they touched on that. But it would have been nice if they had given her then the powers where then she could fly, and I think...
Yeah, well, she got that because she put Captain Marvel in a coma.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, I think they could have worked that in somehow on this, but... Yeah.
Okay, so, final thoughts and star rating, Martin.
Oh, it's a 5-star movie for just my nostalgia coming on. You could pop in X-Men any day, and I will sit down and I will love that movie. If you don't have that, you're going to look at this and be like, oh, well, 3 stars? I don't know. But if you've watched this movie, if you grew up, if it was your first real superhero movie, it'll always have a great place in my heart.
Marsha?
Same. Maybe not 5-star, maybe 4.5. But yeah, same. The nostalgia is strong here.
Yeah, so 3.5 for me because I recognize my nostalgia. This movie is not. This movie is not brilliant by any measure of the movies that we have today. But I am super, super fond of it, and they hit a lot of the right notes for comic book fans, especially fans of the X-Men franchise. So yeah, I loved it, but it's not a spectacular film. Alright, who wants to pick the next one?
Okay. Right.
So that's the Netflix exclusive movie starring Will Smith and Josh Edgerton, I think his name is? Joel Edgerton?
Joel Edgerton.
There we go! That's what we will be reviewing for our next movie. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you have any thoughts about the first X-Men movie, leave them in the comments down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you! Bye!
Take care.
Bye.
And video is on. Don't all jump in now.